The Trump administration is radically reshaping America and the world around it. In the inaugural Vantage Point essay from Australia Institute Press, Dr. Emma Shortis examines Trump's grim vision for America and the future of the Australia-US alliance. Pre-order your copy of After America, Australia and the New World Order, or become a Foundation subscriber to Vantage Point at australiainstitute.org.au/store or via the link in the show notes.
G'day and welcome back to Dollars and Cents. It's the show where we sift through the spreadsheets, dive deep into deficits, investigate inflation, and explain exactly what's going on in the economy. My name is Hayden. I'm the digital media manager here at the Australia Institute and your host on the podcast today in Eleanor's absence. I've been slugging away in reserve grade and I've finally got the call up to the big leagues. And I'm delighted to be here with the one and only Greg Jericho, the chief economist at the Australia Institute.
Hey, Hayden.
So, Greg, we just had an election. The Australian people have voted, and in case you haven't seen any news over the last week, they've re-elected the Labor government with a thumping majority.
At this time, Nine projects the election is won by Labor. There is no path for the Liberal Party or the Coalition to win.
This is an historic Labor moment. The first Prime Minister since John Howard, but the first Labor Prime Minister since Bob Hawke, of course, to win back-to-back elections.
The electoral wipeout of the Coalition on the weekend has raised questions about the future of the Coalition and its modern-day relevance.
I think for those of us in the leadership team, it's been an incredible shock.
I wanted to dig into how specifically the Labor Party campaigned on the economy. We know for the last few years they've been at pains to convey to the electorate that they are good, responsible economic managers. And the fact that they've won seats on both their left and right would probably mean that their political strategy across the board has been vindicated. But we heard a lot that the number one issue for voters was the cost of living. And so I wanted to talk about what is the difference between the sort of nebulous concept of being a responsible economic manager and actually doing practical, noticeable things to make life and services cheaper for people. So do you think voters have stopped caring about the economy as a symbol of like how well we're doing as a country and started to care more about whether or not our government is actually doing things that help us?
No, look, cost of living certainly was paramount during the campaign, but also we always have to remember that if you just think of an issue as, cost of living is huge and think, well, that's going to hurt the government because they're the ones who have been in charge. Well, cost of living has risen. Kind of ignores the fact that at the end of the day, an election is a choice between essentially two parties, two people, yes, other independents and so forth, but and it's all very well to say that the ALP, was bad on cost of living, as the Liberal Party was going around saying and charging and saying you're worse off. But people are like, okay, great, but what about the next 3 years? Who's going to be better at doing that? And it was pretty clear, certainly from the result, and also I'd like to give a shout out to those listeners of the podcast who listen to this podcast but don't actually know that there was an election on the weekend. To the one of you, well done. I'm glad you're still with us. I mean, the election was, the result was clearly just a rebuttal of everything that Peter Dutton was campaigning on, and Peter Dutton himself personally, and the Liberal Party under Peter Dutton, and obviously an approval of what the ALP was doing. But given the ALP wasn't exactly going to the election with a whole suite of policies that you would think, it was kind of a small target election by a government, and it really was just a case of, yes, there was cost of living concerns, but when it came down to it, thinking about who would be the one you'd want to have their hands on the wheel, it really was just, maybe cost of living's tough, but thank God we don't have Peter Dutton, or very much we do not want to have Peter Dutton in charge. So it's always always tough after elections to work out why things happen. We do have some polling and so forth, but mostly we see that the narrative is told by the winners, and we're seeing that very much already with ALP talking about the Greens failed because they were too extreme, because they kept talking about the fact that Israel committing genocide, and that's apparently extreme, and that Peter Dutton was extreme and, it was doing nuclear and other stuff that was kind of culture war-y. And Labor were nicely in the middle in that one. And that's going to be the narrative that is being pushed. Whether it's true or not is almost irrelevant because, as we say, winners always write history, and the press gallery love talking to the winners afterwards. And so that seems to be what the story is.
Yeah, like it feels to me like voters have chosen stability, like especially with sort of global unrest. Like in the US, voters voted for change, and they chose Donald Trump, like a inherently chaotic and risky character, because they wanted change. But voters in Australia were pretty happy to keep the same party going.
Yeah, well, Donald Trump certainly helped there, and that was well done by the ALP and their campaign director in basically taking a really good bet that the more people saw of what was happening in America under Trump, the less they would want to risk anything like that under Dutton. And that was a huge thing, especially when the parallels were impossible to ignore, when you had the Liberal Party running really hard on we're going to cut back the public service.
The Coalition's vowed to cut at least 36,000 public service jobs if they win the election.
There is a lot of waste that's been generated over the course of the last 2.5 years.
The 41,000 job cuts will come from Canberra.
That is 2/3 of the Commonwealth public servants of Australia.
And made it very hard for the Canberra Liberals to be campaigning in this election when so much of the Coalition's policies was centred around Canberra bashing.
41,000 just from Canberra, it's unrealistic and it's not practical.
And we're even going to bring in a Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, exactly the same as what Trump has got with Elon Musk. They're going to put Senator Jacinta Price in charge of it, who is probably the most Trumpian person in the coalition.
She wore the hat.
Yeah.
She's saying the lines.
There was no sort of even attempt to hide it. And yeah, that might have sounded great when you were thinking that up in November last year and maybe in December. But by February, March, when people were actually seeing what was happening over in America and the fact that this was having an impact on pensioners, on veterans, on just anybody who wanted to do a government service or, get some payments on time, people are like, no, we don't want that at all. And the Liberal Party spent forever trying to explain what its policy is, but never actually having a policy other than we're going to cut 41,000, but they couldn't even explain what that meant. Was it natural attrition? Was it going to be voluntary redundancies? Was it frontline services? No, not frontline services. So it was anybody not in the frontline. So, no, only in Canberra, but not in these departments because we're calling those frontline services. And, the numbers that they were coming up with, as our economist Jack Thrower pointed out, they were basically going to have to sack every public servant in Canberra to actually get to 41,000.
Which, funnily enough, that didn't go down very well in Canberra.
Didn't go down very well in Canberra.
The Liberal Party's Senate vote dropped from 30% to 15%, like it halved in Canberra.
Yeah. And pretty much all of it went to David Pocock.
Yeah.
And even like on the last day, you had Angus Taylor saying, maybe we'll just transfer Canberra workers to Goulburn or to
Queanbeyan. Send them across the road.
Yeah, or we'll send them to Queanbeyan because then they won't be in Canberra. And so that's somehow okay. It was just a schmozzle. And you think of also their other measures that they were putting in place. Things like, we're going to introduce a tax offset for 1 year. And it's like, great, for 1 year. So in a year's later, we're going to have our taxes go up again. And, we're going to cut the petrol excise for 1 year. So, okay, so in a year's time, my petrol price, it was all so short-term thinking. There was no sense that they really had anything other than, let's hope people fall for this bribe, which is essentially what they were.
Yeah,
and
I think people just saw through it.
And also just the chaotic, as you say, the stability of Labor was writ large on the day that Donald Trump announced his tariffs. As soon as Donald Trump stopped speaking, Jim Chalmers and Anthony Albanese gave a press conference in Commonwealth government offices looking very much like the government in charge. We've got a plan. Peter Dutton was over in Perth that day, which was just insane because we all knew that day was going to be the tariff day. They sent Peter Dutton over to West Australia, which meant he was a couple hours behind everybody. By the time he stood up to give his press conference, a couple hours had passed. The narrative was already set that the government had a plan, we're in charge, and Peter Dutton came out looking pissed off that we didn't get higher tariffs, and we did, You put all that together, plus the fact that Peter Dutton, not exactly Bob Hawke of the charisma stakes, it was pretty clear that, the public completely rejected that. And it kind of is up in the air as to how much that rejection also meant an affirmation of the ALP. And clearly the ALP did great, huge swings everywhere, picked up a lot of seats. And now it comes down to what are they going to do with that? Or are they just going to take that as meaning, let's hope next time we have someone as useless as Peter Dutton to come along and keep us in power?
Yeah, well, you've served yourself up a really nice segue to my next question, which is looking forward. So with this massive election win, not only have they secured themselves another 3 years, but probably another 6 years. Like, it's really hard to see how the Liberal Party could come back from such a massive loss. And the question is, is that sort of sensible, small target, responsible economic management going to be enough for the electorate over the next little period? Like, do they need to do more?
I think clearly they do because of actually the size of their victory. Now, if it was a minority, and I think the ALP campaigned in the expectation of a minority government, no one could have predicted how bad Peter Dutton would be as a campaigner. No one could predict how just terrible it all would be. So if you had the Labor Party going with, as I say, small sort of target thing, because if you're going to have a minority government, it's all going to be every day is a negotiation to get things passed. You can't sort of, have this big agenda because it's all going to be compromised all the way. Now there's pretty much no excuse, and everyone knows it's no excuse. Everyone's looking at this result and going, well, ALP, it's now or never. You have got a massive majority. In the Senate, obviously don't have a majority, but you got the Greens who are clearly progressive. Now, the ALP are already painting them as blockers, which is just pre-political spin of, they want to make it look like the Greens are going to be stopping them from doing anything. We don't even know who's going to be leader of the Greens at this point, but I think clearly we're going to have a different environment than we had over the past 3 years. But also it's a case of, you can say the Greens block and all that, and that's fine, but people are not going to understand. They're going to go, you have got a thumping big majority. What more do you need? What more do you want? If you can't get good things done now, clearly you're never going to get things done now.
Yeah.
So you can no longer say, oh, look, we'd love to have dental and Medicare, but we can't afford it. We can't get that through. It's like, no, I'm pretty sure the Greens would vote for dental and Medicare. So if you're saying, no, we don't need dental and we can't have dental and Medicare, really what you're saying is actually we, the Labor Party, don't think there should be dental and Medicare. We, the Labor Party, think that actually gas companies shouldn't pay tax. we, the Labor Party, think that the way the housing market is being done at the moment is fine.
Mm.
All of these excuses are kind of gone.
Yeah,
There's not
yeah.
even the pretense. Like, at least in the last election campaign, it was the Greens plus Pocock plus Lambie. You had to do a lot of, and there was a bit of herding cats. So basically, the ALP, I think, should be taking the view of actually we can do anything.
Mm.
We can be bold, and we should be bold, because didn't you get into Parliament? Didn't you get into politics? Didn't you do all of this stuff because you wanted a more progressive, more fair Australia?
Mm.
Great. Now's the chance. You have got a chance like no one in the LP pretty much has ever had.
Yeah. Well
and
said,
if you're not
Greg.
going to take it, well, and to be honest, I almost don't care about what happens with the election next time. I'll do, what's their best strategy to win or lose? It's like, why are you in Parliament? Why are you a politician? It's not to win elections. It's because you joined the Labor Party because of something. What was that something? Are you doing it? Are you pushing for it? And if you're not, then seriously, I don't care if you got a majority. I don't care if you're better than the other mob. Just, look in the mirror and wonder, is this all there is?
Yeah, and there is, so I would just make the point, there is so much that they can do that would be massively popular that there isn't anything stopping them from doing, like taxing the gas industry, for example. We've talked about that a lot. There's also things like reforming the capital gains tax discount that, they were excited to do in 2019. And there's these things that have been on the table in the sort of Labor Party agenda for years and years and years. And exactly right, as you said, like, if not now, then when? Like, now is the opportunity for them to show their vision for the Australia that they believe in and that they want us to live in. And here's the opportunity. Moving on, we've got some new figures this week to dive into. Some new retail spending figures, which is basically like a sort of pulse check on how people are feeling economically, whether they're spending all their money or trying to save it because they're worried. Can you sort of give us a little overview of these figures, Greg, and what they show?
Yeah, they're kind of important because these latest figures, we get retail figures every month, but every 3 months we get the quarterly figures, which is the figures in volume. So it's not talking about how much actually was spent. It's, in a sense, how much was bought. And why this is important, because, whenever we talk about GDP and the economy, we're not actually talking just money spent. We're talking sort of volume of things, because we want to be buying more things. We want to be producing more things, not just, the price of those things have gone up. And the Reserve Bank, when they met in April, were looking at the most recent figures before, which looked at the December quarter and go, oh, there was a bit of a bump in December of spending in retail. That's a good sign. Things are looking up. Households are spending more. So we better not raise interest rates, because it seems like everyone's, back happy. And they definitely weren't just spending big in those last 3 months of 2024 because people were taking advantage of sales. No, this is a real pickup. And then the most recent figures for the first 3 months of this year came out and showed no increase in retail spending at all. And if you take into account population growth, retail spending fell. And it's pretty clear that, those last 3 months were just a blip, was just people taking advantage of all the sales, and that actually households are still doing it really tough. And clearly the Reserve Bank should have cut interest rates in April, because interest rates are the overriding thing that is hurting people right now with their cost of living.
Yeah, and so the Reserve Bank will be meeting later this month, the 20th of May. So we are assuming, most people are assuming that they're going to cut rates then. Do you think that will sort of give people the relief that they're looking for?
Oh, it will, but not instantaneously. And this is what also figures out this week on cost of living showed that even though the Reserve Bank cut rates in February, over the first 3 months of this year, the average cost of mortgage repayments actually rose. And that's because it takes time for banks to pass on those interest rate cuts.
Hmm.
Some people are on fixed rates, but also others, just with a mortgage that the bank hasn't dropped straight away. What banks will more often do is immediately drop the new home loan rate. But if you've got a home loan, that'll take a while they'll say, oh, we'll be dropping the interest rate and this will take in effect in 6 weeks' time.
Yeah,
and often that's the case even with interest rate rises.
They were very quick to increase the rates, though, when the rates went up.
I was looking at the figures, and since March 2022, so the last 3 years, about 47%, or let's say half, of the increase in cost of living for employee households, so that's households where someone has a job, half of the increase in cost of living over the last 3 years is due to mortgage repayments.
Yeah, wow.
And now remember as well, that's an average of all employee households, which includes employee households who are renters. So if you actually do have a mortgage, it's been more than half. It's been, probably close to 2/3 of the increase in your cost of living has come from you having to pay more in your mortgage, because the actual increase in mortgage repayments has gone up around 163% in those times.
Oh, God.
So massive amount. So when you're worrying about cost of living, and this actually came through, I think, in the election campaign, where there was a lot of talk about cost of living, but it's a case of the main thing being interest rates. And people knew interest rates there was a cut in February. They knew more were on the way. And they were not so much shitty at the government. I think they were shitty at the Reserve Bank for not cutting in April. And it was magnified when Peter Dutton then started responding to all the talk that there were going to be more interest rate cuts in May by suggesting that was somehow a bad thing because, maybe we're going to go into recession. That's why interest rates are coming down. And everyone's like, dude, interest rates coming down is a good thing. Shut up, But, yeah, I just think the Reserve Bank really misread it because of the lag time of how long it takes before it really has an impact. They've just delayed the assistance to households by 6 weeks that was not needed. And there's an outside chance they'll do a 50 basis point cut on the 20th of May. Probably won't, but the market says it's about a 50% chance it will.
Yeah, which is sort of like a bigger cut than standard.
Yeah, normally they do 25 basis points. So 25 basis points is 0.25%.
Yep.
So there's a chance it'll almost certainly go from 4.1 to 3.85%. That's the cash rate. But there's an outside chance it'll go to 3.6%, which would be kind of 2 interest rate cuts at once. Outside chance, more likely it'll go to 3.85%. But households have really been hit hard by interest rate rises, and it's time, a bit like as we've been saying about the government, it's time for the Reserve Bank to get on with it. Stop this. Things are uncertain. We better not do it. It's pretty certain that households are doing it tough.
Yeah, that's a great point.
President Trump unveiling a fresh set of tariffs today, this time on the movie industry.
Other nations, a lot of them, have stolen our movie industry. And I'm saying if they're not willing to make a movie inside the United States, then we should have a tariff on movies that come in.
He did say 100% tariff, but on what? The revenue that the film generated, the revenue that it generated in the U.S., the revenue that it generated in other countries, the production costs. So no one's really clear on that.
All right, to round this out, let's talk about the U.S. So, I mean, they're just all over the place. Like the U.S. economy at the moment looks like it's just like one big Trump and dump scheme. Like the tariffs are on and then they're off, and that is having a global effect. But like how much? Like we've sort of seen them play out a little bit, and some tariffs have been wound back. And do you think that's still affecting us here in Australia, or will it continue to affect us?
Yeah, it's certainly affecting the global economy. We're seeing reports of shipping quantities being markedly reduced, harbours in America being very much underused and below capacity. And that is pretty much the canary in the coal mine, because if if your ports are not busy, that's a good sign that economic activity is not busy.
Yeah.
And
So either people aren't buying goods in the US, or other countries are choosing not to sell their stuff to the US.
yeah, and it's a lot of uncertainty is why this is happening. And, and the idiocy and craziness just continues. This week, Trump announced that he's going to put 100% tariff on foreign films, on foreign film production. And everyone's like, what? I say this as someone who, in my former life in the public service, I worked in the international film tax offset division. I was the guy who basically oversaw is called the location offset. So that's for big budget films when they come out to Australia. They used to get 15%, now 30%. So that's like, let's say a film like The Fall Guy, which is made in Australia, big budget film, 30% of all their expense making that film in Australia had a tax offset. And as someone whose job was to look at film budgets, let me tell you, they're pretty complicated things. And, they are The Fall Guy was made out here, but not all their expense was here. For example, and I'm not talking about The Fall Guy because clearly that happened after I was there. But on these big budgets, yes, they'll be spending money here, but the actors' salaries might be paid in America. And then there's post-production that might be done in America or an American film. And this was something like the most recent film, Sinners, made in America, but the PDV work, sort of a lot of the special effects and the post-production work was done by an Australian firm. So it's like, okay, what's the tariff on?
Yeah.
How much do you put a tariff on a film that is made in America, but some of the post work was done in Australia? How are you going to actually put a tariff? Because let me tell you, Hollywood is very good with their accountancy and their budgeting in not only hiding things but confusing things. This is not a case like, you're importing a car where the car crosses the border and we know, yep, it came from Japan, it came from there, we can slap a 10% tariff on the cost of whatever you paid for that. Because that's not how films work. And also it's a case of, think of what's really popular in America at the moment, Bluey, which is massive on the Disney Plus thing, but made in Australia, but the ownership is actually Disney and UK company and Australia. So who is in charge of it's just nuts. And while that's, certainly worrying the hell out of the Australian film industry, because a lot of these, the workers on crews depend on the big money projects from America because they have big budgets. And Australian films certainly don't have the budget to be able to support you working full time and investing in new equipment and everything. But it's just, a perfect encapsulation of Trump's tariff policy and why it is causing mass chaos and causing people to go, we're just not going to bother sending stuff. We're going to look for other markets and do other things because you just don't know.
Yeah, even if the tariffs don't come into play, it's the uncertainty that is stopping a lot of that investment.
And companies love certainty. It's one of the reasons why Australia is actually a really good place to invest, even though we might have higher labour costs and even some higher taxes than other countries, is they come here and they know, everything's pretty much fine. We're not going to get dicked around. Yeah, there might be some changes to IR, but overall our investment is safe. And it's not the case with Trump where you go, I don't know what to do. And that's certainly going to flow through. How much it flows through to Australia is dependent on how much it flows around the world and affects places like China. But America is just a shit show in terms of its economy. It hasn't flowed through yet completely into things like their unemployment figures and everything yet, but the signs aren't great.
Thanks for having me, Greg. I feel more assured in my knowledge of my uncertainty about what's going to happen.
You're more certain that you're uncertain.
I'm more certain that I'm uncertain.
That's our aim here on Dollars and Cents. We will be back with Eleanor next week for another Dollars and Cents, but this Dollars and Cents was recorded on the 7th of May, and some things may have changed. If you want to find out all the details about cost of living and what's going on with the retail spending, have a gander at my column on the Guardian Australia website. And for more research on everything that you need to know about the economy, about democracy, about climate change, about the environment, everything in between and outside that, go to our website, australiainstitute.org.au. You will find a plethora of stuff there.
Yeah, there's a button at the top that says subscribe, and if you enter your email into that, you'll get a free newsletter every fortnight where we combine all of our best work and podcasts and webinars and events and send it to you so you can read at your leisure.
And also there's a great column by Amy Ramikas summing up what's been happening in the last fortnight. As always, our music was by Blue Dot Sessions. Everyone, have a great week, and we'll see you all next week.
See ya.